Okay, this episode today is for any girly who struggles with their gut issues, whether that's bloating, constipation, poor digestion, you name it. In this episode, we just want to have a really vulnerable and open and honest conversation about the gut issues that we've experienced. And hopefully, you can feel a little less alone in your journey. I think it's something that a lot of people don't talk about and they don't get to the root of. And so we just want to provide some value and some really tangible things to help you guys if you're struggling with any gut issues, but also make you feel less alone in your journey. So we're just going to kick it off, and I'm going to ask Annabelle to share vulnerably a little bit about her experiences lately with her gut health, because she's kind of been on her own journey and she has a lot of really valuable tips to share.
Yeah, in all honesty, we really wanted to have this conversation. I think it can be a really isolating experience. And, I historically am somebody who's had a stomach of steel. I always tease my brothers and sisters. We went on a family trip to India and I was the only one to not get sick on that trip. But in the last few months, I've really been in the thick of it. I've been having a lot of gut issues, slow motility, bloating, honestly, just the feeling of something fermenting in my gut. And I know that something is off. And it just also has proved to me the power of the gut-brain connection. Brain fog, all these sorts of symptoms have been really up there for me. And I've kind of been navigating it and trying to figure it out. I know that there's a lot of emotional processing going on and that's connected to it, but I've definitely been on a journey. So I'm just here to share and see if I can give anybody the feeling that they're not alone and offer some tips.
Yeah, so what have been the biggest things you've done to help relieve your symptoms? And I just want to call out too, none of these have been fixes because Annabelle is still very much in the depths. She's actually going to do testing on her gut, and she can share a little bit about like what test she's going to do if you guys are curious. But she's actually going to work with a doctor because it's actually that severe at this point. It's not just like, oh, my stomach's off. Like, she's having real gut issues. So these tips and tricks, I think, are things that have helped you to like relieve your symptoms, but they haven't cured the issue. But correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. I am going to now finally see a doctor. I think that there was this feeling where I thought, it's from, emotional things. And while I do think that plays a big part in it and that often makes it worse, I do think that just doing some testing to figure out, okay, like what's actually going on with my gut microbiome is going to give me a lot of peace of mind and just kind of understanding what the next steps are. Because I feel like at the moment I've been playing kind of whack-a-mole. For the last few months, it's been a lot of off and on. I think my main symptoms have been, just really slow motility. Things are not moving. And if I eat something and it's not even necessarily always triggered by specific things. There's just some days or a string of days where things just don't move and I have brain fog, my mood is down, and I get really, it makes me very anxious too. I think that is the emotional piece that's tied to it as well. And that doesn't help, right? So the things that have really helped me are consistency with my meals, trying to eat warm, grounding meals. Also, before I eat, getting myself into a really calm state and trusting my body. I think my instinct when something is off, I've been very healthy, never really dealt with health issues. So when something's off, I automatically think, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with me. I go into a fear state, and that, your body is always listening to you, and that my nervous system then is not regulated in that moment, and that makes digestion a lot harder. So I think just slowing down and trusting that my body's trying to speak to me rather than having this mentality that there's something wrong with me and I have to fix it has been really important just before I kind of get into the nitty-gritty of things that I've actually done to help.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think what's really hard about gut issues is that it can stem from so many different issues or like causes, and the symptoms can be really similar. So it's really hard to figure out what can be going in your body because you could have the exact same symptoms as somebody else, and maybe they have like SIBO, or maybe they have a food allergy, or whatever it is for them is not the reason that it is for you. Like, there's a lot of bioindividuality when it comes to gut issues. And so I do think it's great that you're kind of taking your health into your own hands and you're meeting with a doctor and you're going to run some tests. I think that's going to be really, really valuable.
I am going the functional route just because, I thought about, I don't want to go to a doctor and have them prescribe me a laxative or some kind of course of antibiotics and then send me on my way. I know that there's always a root cause to these issues. So that's kind of the route that felt right for me. But yeah, I think understanding really what's going on and then being able to make the necessary changes is key. So there are some things that I've done that I've definitely recognized has really helped me, and just some like little tips and tricks if you're really struggling with it. I think first thing in the morning, having some kind of warm beverage before you have any coffee. What I've been doing that has really helped me and is great for the gut lining is I take a lemon and I cut it in half, and if it's waxed, I cut off the skin, but if it's unwaxed, I wash it and I actually include the skin, so the entire lemon, and I blend it in my NutriBullet with actually fresh aloe vera leaf and a little pinch of sea salt. I have that first thing in the morning, and that really gets your digestion going and is soothing to the gut lining. I also have a lot of bone broth. I found that has helped me. And just focusing on foods that are nourishing, but also easy for my body to digest. So I've been kind of steering clear. I do love salads, I love smoothies, but I've just recognized that it takes a lot more energy for your body to actually digest those foods. And this is kind of in line with TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, which I am very interested in. And warmth is a lot easier for your body to digest because you don't have to actually, have energy to heat up those foods and digest them. So that's made a big impact for me.
Yeah. Oh my God. I think back to when I struggled. I've been on my own gut journey as well. And I think like when my digestion was at its worst was when I was eating so many vegetables and especially raw vegetables. So cooked vegetables are a lot easier to digest on your stomach. That raw fiber, it's really, really hard for your digestion. And I think it's confusing. A lot of people think that when they have gut issues, no, I just need to eat healthy. I need to eat more clean. And so what they do is they cut things out like dairy. They cut things out like gluten. And by the way, I know that for some people, these foods can be problematic, but I think for the vast majority of people, they're actually not, especially if you're focusing on high quality sources. Like if you're eating homemade high quality sourdough, for most people, even though that's gluten, it's really not gonna hurt your stomach. It's one of the most easily digestible foods. And same thing with like a very high quality grass-fed yogurt, for example. That's actually very, very soothing. I know some people do have allergies, so I don't want to like discount that. But for a lot of people, when you focus on foods that are really easy to digest, it's going to really help your digestion. And I think a lot of times those problematic food groups like dairy and gluten, they're the first to get kicked out of people's diets when they think I just need to eat more clean. Let me just eat all the raw celery and carrots and broccoli that I can. And those foods can absolutely be a lot more problematic. So can nuts. When I also was struggling with my digestion, raw nuts were, again, a food I thought were very, very healthy. They're very healthy. But when you think about how humans evolved to eat nuts, we actually had to like hand crack open these nuts, and it was very labor intensive. And so we weren't eating bags of peanuts at a time. We were eating like a few nuts, and that's how our digestive system works. And it's not designed to tolerate eating a whole bag of peanuts. So if you're someone who's eating a ton of raw veggies, a ton of nuts, seeds, those are things that your digestive system has to work a lot harder to break down.
I'm sorry. I just have to laugh and think back to during COVID. When we were both, living together at home, we had the amount of roasted cashews that we would consume together was not well. My poor digestion.
I know. And also, one other thing here is that nuts typically tend to be a snacking food. And so snacking, would love to hear your thoughts on this and how you've kind of changed your approach to snacking with your gut issues. But snacking can also cause a lot of digestive issues, which is counterintuitive, again, for a lot of people. People think that when they have gut issues, they need to eat less food. So this is how I used to think, like, I need to eat less, so let me just have some nuts for lunch instead of a meal. And that would actually backfire. So walk us through like your experience with snacking.
Okay, this one I've been on such a journey with because I am a grade 1 grazer. Like I used to be such a grazer and I would get really full quickly. I didn't like the idea of having these big meals. So with these gut issues, I do find I feel a lot better when I give my digestion a break. So I'm not just like mindlessly snacking throughout the day. I also have found though that if I go too long without food, they can flare up, right? So it's all about creating safety within your body and really listening to your body and letting it guide you. I think there was a period of time where I was like, right, I'm going to do a bone broth fast. Like I'm going to give my digestion system a complete break. There was a time where I was having rigidly 3 meals per day and not allowing myself to snack. And with all of that and all that rigidity, it was actually creating a lot more stress on my system because I wasn't listening to my body. I wasn't trusting my body, right? And that's I think a big cause of these issues for me. Yes, there might be something underlying. As Caroline said, I'm going to do some testing now. I'm more than happy to take you guys along on that journey if you have any questions. But I get it. There's so much information out there about what you should do. And I think the thing that has helped me the most is really listening to my body. And often if I can get quiet enough, I know what I want to eat. And my mind and all the information that we have so often tells me, no, that won't be good for me. No, that's not going to be good for X, Y, or Z. And that kind of mental chatter gets in the way and I think causes a lot more damage than good. So I think that, it's an interesting terrain. Like you have to be able to listen to your body well enough to know that if you're craving sugar all the time, that's probably the bad bacteria in your gut that's craving that, not actually, your true what you actually want and what's going to be good for you. But with all that to say, now what I am doing is I make sure to eat when I'm hungry. And I think I also was on the trap of not eating when I was hungry in the name of 3 rigid meals a day, right? So I do try to have consistency. And when I'm really consistent with it, I actually am hungry around the same times every day. And some days, if I've done a lot more exercise that day or I've been walking a lot, I might need a little snack around 4 p.m. and I'm not going to not allow myself to have that, right? So I'll really listen to what sounds good to me, something light, and I won't force myself to eat a meal or finish my meal because, I'm trying to get X grams of protein or follow some kind of rules. I think really slowing down and listening to my body and it's actually a lot harder said than done. It sounds so easy in name, but it's actually sometimes harder. And that has been the thing that has really helped me. So sometimes 3 meals a day, sometimes adding a snack in, but making sure that there's consistency, general consistency without rigidity.
Yeah, and I just realized another thing. I can't believe we haven't said this in case it's not obvious, guys, but processed food, so anything that comes in a package, anything with ingredients you cannot pronounce, anything full of sugar is inherently bad for your gut. I probably should say that, but it is very obvious, at least to us. But if you're newer in your journey and you're eating tons of protein bars and, packaged things that are labeled healthy, they're labeled organic, those are not actually feeding your gut with nutrients. They could really be flaring up your gut. And I think back to when I struggled very heavily with orthorexia and I was constantly looking for like better for you options, which by the way, I'm still obsessed with making like better for you sweet treats. But the difference is when you make it at home with real whole food ingredients that you can pronounce and you find in your kitchen, it actually has nutritional benefit. Whereas what you buy in the grocery store, like I would buy a lot of things that were like no sugar, sweetened with sugar alcohols, for example, and it would be marketed as healthy. Or a lot of these like keto health products, they put really wacky fibers and stuff. There's also like keto protein bars I know that put like sugar alcohols and these fibers that literally can wreak havoc on your gut. And it's so innocent because you think you're making a healthier choice, which in a lot of ways you are compared to a lot of the other products out there. But things that are marketed as better for you and healthier and they're using ingredients that you cannot find in your kitchen, they're likely gonna hurt your gut. So if you're eating a lot of those and you're struggling with gut issues, I think the first and the easiest step is just to take them out of your diet and focus on whole foods. So single ingredient foods, fruits, veggies, rice, quinoa, oats, protein like fish, meat, your fats, avocado, like all of the things that have one ingredient and one ingredient only.
That's such a good point. I should have probably mentioned that in the beginning. But no, yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think too, if you're really at the height of your gut issues, focusing on simplicity can be nourishing and it can be good as well. I used to always traditionally have my largest meal kind of at the end of the day. And when I was really struggling on some days, I would have a really light dinner that was, I'd have something simple, right? Like bone broth and a sweet potato with some ghee and cinnamon, that felt really nourishing to my body, but that was easy to digest. And I think as well, it can be tricky with social things, but eating dinner early has completely changed my life. I can't tell you not only how much I sleep so much better, but I just wake up feeling a lot better. I feel like my body has really allowed, that time overnight I can actually digest, and because you're in that rest and digest state after 3 hours or so. So I really try not to eat anything at least 3 hours before I go to bed. And I just wake up feeling so much better, clearer, my mind is sharper, I have energy. And it just kind of shows you the impact of how food can affect your mood, all things. And, focusing on whole foods is just number one.
Can we also talk about, while we're talking about simplicity,
I know exactly what you're going to say.
You know what I'm going to say?
Yeah.
Okay, so we used to get in fights when we'd be cooking dinner because I would be like, it's enough to make one vegetable. And Annabelle had this mindset where you had to have literally, I swear to God, we'd make a stir fry with every single vegetable on the planet. Broccoli,
it would
mushrooms,
be boring.
Carrots, onions, potatoes. And I would just be like, oh my gosh, you're overwhelming me. And finally, I think she's finally adopted this switch, but sometimes more is not better. I think, yes, it's vegetables, it's better, but your body does digest different foods differently. And so when you can very much simplify what's on your plate, rice, chicken, broccoli, avocado, instead of, rice and quinoa and also a potato and then, all these different things, it's like your body is like, what is going on? How do I deal with all of this? And so when you can make it simple, and I know sometimes that's boring, but again, we are talking to the girls who have gut issues. So simplicity is going to be your best friend when it comes to healing your gut.
Yeah, and you can also make it, I think sometimes it's a mindset thing too. That's why I would be throwing every vegetable under the sun, is because I thought otherwise I wouldn't be satiated, right? Because there's nothing worse than just having rinse and repeat the same meal. Yes, food is nourishment, but there's also an emotional element to it. And if you get too stuck in that cycle of only eating bland food, it sucks the life out of your soul. At least it does for me. And I've realized that adding a variety of vegetables isn't what's going to make my meal satiating necessarily. It can be a really good healthy sauce that you add to it. There's so many ways to make your meal satiating, and it doesn't need to have 1,000 ingredients to it.
Yeah. Okay. And just lastly, to wrap this up, while we are talking about the emotional component, I think this is something that so many people, including myself, I would just disregard for the longest time. But I'm currently working with a somatic coach and learning a lot about the body and the brain especially. But really quickly, just want to touch on the fact that our hunger and our digestion is controlled by the reptilian brain. That's the bottom part of our brain. It's the part of the brain that develops first in utero, and it's all about sensory and sensations and do I feel safe? So when people say, oh, the gut-brain connection, that is real. It's very, very real. And it's not only what you think, but it's also if you're going through an emotional time in your life, if you're processing things, if you're not feeling safe for whatever reason. And by the way, this is not this is perceived safety. So it's not literal safety. This is perceived safety. It is going to impact your digestion. So please do a little bit of research into that if you're someone who doesn't really believe in it or who hasn't taken it seriously, because I think for me and in healing my gut issue, addressing those underlying emotional causes has been really key.
It's so, so true. I had somebody ask me once, what reality are you creating for yourself? And it's so true. Our thoughts just play an incredible role in the way that we feel and, that perceived safety that you're talking about. And anytime my gut issues would flare, I immediately felt unsafe. I immediately felt like something was wrong with me. I had to fix. I was in this very kind of reactionary way, instead of the opposite of that. I could, feel, wow, my body's actually trying to tell me something. And I kid you not, that when I shifted into that mentality, things would start moving, right? But so that's just another really key one. That's so good to bring that up. I do also just want to give you some really tangible things that I've done at the peak, just rapid fire in the morning. Please, please, please do not have coffee on an empty stomach if you're having gut issues. It is very acidic. I know that there's that feeling of, oh, my stomach hurts, I don't want to eat anything. But the things that have really helped me, bone broth in the morning, that fresh aloe vera leaf and lemon. Make sure you cut just the skin, like inside, obviously. You want the piece, run it under water, blend it. Another one that is great is a shot of very high quality olive oil, about a tablespoon or so, with lemon, blended with salt as well, first thing in the morning. Papaya has been really good first thing in the morning, again, on an empty stomach. Sometimes having a few of the seeds, very few. I've made the mistake where I had way too many and it did a lot of damage to my stomach, but just chewing a few of the seeds can also help. They have digestive enzymes in them. Kiwi as well, golden kiwis, washing them really well and eating them with the skin on has helped. And having that fruit on an empty stomach is definitely, if you're struggling with gut issues, a good way to start the day.
I love it. For me, all I have to do is drink a coffee and my gut is flowing very smoothly. Okay, guys, well, we're going to wrap it up there. Again, if you have any questions, please share what you're experiencing with your gut issues. And if you want to know more about the tests that Annabelle's doing, we could definitely share that information as well. But otherwise, we'll see you guys in the next one.
Thanks.